There was a time in American movies when a familiar face did not demand attention, but earned it gradually, almost politely. Audiences would sit down, watch a story unfold, and only later realize that someone on the screen had quietly stayed with them. Bridget Fonda belonged to that tradition. She did not arrive as a spectacle, and she did not rely on excess. She became known through repetition, through presence, through the steady accumulation of trust. For viewers who had lived through the golden age of Hollywood and watched its slow transformation, her career felt comfortably recognizable. She was not marketed as a novelty, nor was she framed as a rebellion against the past. She fit naturally into the lineage of American screen acting that valued clarity, restraint, and emotional truth. When she appeared, she did not compete with the story. She served it. Born into one of the most storied families in film history, Bridget Fonda grew up surrounded by the weight of legacy, yet she seemed determined never to lean on it. Her grandfather, Henry Fonda, represented something deeply ingrained in American consciousness: moral steadiness, quiet courage, a sense of right and wrong that did not require explanation. Her father, Peter Fonda, carried the restless energy of a generation pushing against convention. Bridget stood between these worlds, absorbing both without being consumed by either. She did not rush into acting as a child, nor did she seek attention for the sake of visibility. Instead, she learned. She watched. She developed an understanding of performance that favored patience over display. When she began appearing on screen, audiences sensed that she trusted them. She did not underline emotion. She allowed it to exist. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, her presence became increasingly familiar. She appeared in roles that required intelligence, vulnerability, and inner tension, often all at once. What stood out was not just her talent, but her judgment. She chose parts that allowed her to explore character rather than image. She was never loud, never exaggerated, never desperate to be seen. For older viewers especially, this felt like a continuation of something they had always valued. There was no rush. Scenes unfolded at a human pace. Moments were allowed to linger. Bridget Fonda seemed to understand that sometimes the most powerful thing an actor can do is nothing at all. As the decade progressed, her career settled into a steady rhythm. She moved comfortably between genres, never becoming trapped by a single identity. She could be romantic without sentimentality, strong without hardness, frightened without melodrama. Directors trusted her, and audiences followed her willingly from one film to the next. By the mid-1990s, she had become a fixture of American cinema, yet she never felt overexposed. She appeared often enough to remain present, but not so frequently that audiences tired of her. This balance, once common, had become increasingly rare. Many viewers recognized it instinctively and appreciated it deeply. Then, gradually, the rhythm changed. New roles became less frequent. Appearances slowed. At first, it felt temporary, the natural ebb and flow of a working actor's life. But as time passed, it became clear that something more definitive was taking place. Bridget Fonda was stepping away. What made this moment so striking was its quietness. There were no announcements, no farewell performances, no attempts to frame the narrative. She did not explain herself to the public, nor did she owe anyone an explanation. She simply chose to stop. In an industry built on visibility, this choice felt almost radical. Hollywood expects reinvention, return, resilience through exposure. Bridget Fonda offered none of that. She allowed absence to speak for her, even as audiences continued to wonder why. The question lingered not because of disappointment, but because of curiosity. Why leave when success was still available? Why close a door that had not yet shut? The answer, as time would reveal, lay not in loss or failure, but in intention. As the years passed, the shape of Bridget Fonda's decision became clearer, though she never spelled it out herself. She married composer Danny Elfman and began building a life that existed far beyond cameras and scripts. Motherhood followed, and with it came a reordering of values that many Americans, particularly those who have lived long enough to see priorities shift, understand intimately. For a generation raised with the belief that work was important but not all-consuming, her choice made sense. There was once an understanding that a person could complete a chapter and move on without apology. Bridget Fonda lived by that older wisdom, even as the culture around her changed. She did not attempt to preserve her public image. She did not control the narrative of her absence. She did not use nostalgia as a tool. She allowed her work to remain untouched, trusting that those who valued it would remember it without being reminded. In later years, occasional photographs reminded the world that time moves forward for everyone. Reactions were mixed, as they often are, but those reactions revealed something important. They showed how uncomfortable modern culture has become with natural aging, especially when it occurs outside the protective frame of celebrity performance. Bridget Fonda aged as any private citizen would, without obligation to illusion. For many viewers aged 65 and older, this felt honest, even comforting. They remembered a time when stars grew older without explanation, when faces changed and that change was accepted. Bridget Fonda's later years reflected that older, quieter dignity. Watching her films again now, audiences often notice how well they have held up. Her performances do not rely on trends, fashion, or novelty. They rely on emotional clarity and restraint. She never pushed a moment beyond what it required. She trusted silence. She trusted the audience. Her legacy, then, is not one of disappearance, but of completion. She entered the public eye, contributed meaningfully, and then stepped away when she felt her work was done. She did not dilute her impact by staying too long, nor did she diminish it by chasing relevance. There is something profoundly American in that decision. It reflects a belief in self-determination, in knowing when enough is enough, in valuing life beyond applause. Bridget Fonda did not reject her audience. She simply chose to live without one. Today, she remains exactly where she belongs, not frozen in nostalgia, not diminished by absence, but preserved in memory as she was thoughtful, grounded, and quietly compelling. For those who watched her during her years on screen, her story does not feel unfinished. It feels resolved. In the end, Bridget Fonda reminds us that success is not measured by endurance alone, and that sometimes the most graceful ending is the one chosen freely, without explanation, and without regret. What ultimately defines Bridget Fonda's story is not mystery, but consistency. Long before she stepped away from the screen, she had already explained, in her own quiet way, how she viewed her life and her work. Acting mattered to her, but it was never meant to replace living. Fame arrived, but it was never treated as something she needed to protect or prolong. From the beginning, there was an understanding that a career could be meaningful without being permanent. During the height of her success, she never spoke as someone trying to hold on to attention. She did not describe Hollywood as a dream fulfilled or a place that completed her. Instead, she spoke about work, balance, and the importance of having a life that existed beyond cameras and scripts. Those ideas, understated at the time, now feel central to understanding her departure. Her relationship with Hollywood was practical, not romantic. She respected the craft, but she did not romanticize the lifestyle. She valued routine, normalcy, and privacy in ways that often placed her at odds with the expectations placed on public figures. As opportunities continued, she weighed them against the life she wanted, not the image others expected her to maintain. When her priorities changed, she allowed that change to happen fully. She did not frame it as sacrifice, and she did not present it as a loss. She simply moved forward. Marriage and motherhood were not used as public explanations, but as personal decisions that reshaped how she chose to spend her time and energy. Acting became optional, not essential. What is striking is how little she felt the need to justify that choice. She did not offer long reflections, farewell speeches, or carefully managed statements. She trusted that the work she had already done was enough, and that those who valued it would continue to do so without reminders. In later years, public curiosity resurfaced from time to time, often shaped by modern expectations rather than her own words. Yet she remained silent, consistent with the values she had always expressed. She did not correct narratives or defend her appearance. She allowed herself to exist as a private person, no longer performing a role for the public. Looking back now, her films feel complete rather than interrupted. They remain as they were, preserved in the moment she chose to leave them. Her performances still resonate because they were built on restraint, intelligence, and emotional clarity rather than spectacle. Those qualities age well. For audiences who remember an earlier Hollywood, her story feels familiar and reassuring. There was once a time when careers ended quietly, when privacy was respected, and when fulfillment was not measured by constant presence. Bridget Fonda lived by those principles, even as the culture around her shifted. In the end, her legacy is not defined by disappearance, but by resolution. She did not leave because she failed, and she did not stay because she was afraid to stop. She chose an ending on her own terms. And that choice, perhaps more than anything else, explains who she has always been.